Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the third and final day of the Shiny Conference. It's been a fantastic few days, and we're excited to see so much engagement from the community. My name is Micah. I'm the Technical Content Specialist at Absalon, and I'll be the host for the next few talks. Excuse me. Today, we're kicking off with a very special keynote from the team at Johnson & Johnson. Damon Hansen, the Advanced Analytics Manager, and Alberto Matamoros, the Global Capability Deployment Manager at J&J, will share what it means to be a digital-first company in the context of project delivery, along with a few examples of how they're helping business functions operate more efficiently and exploring the use of Shiny in business. So without further delay, let's welcome our speakers on stage. Damon, Alberto, welcome.
Hi, Micah. Can you hear us clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and a happy Friday. Thank you for the warm introduction there, and also the opportunity to speak at the conference. As you mentioned, I'm here with my colleague, Alberto Llobet, and we're going to share with you a couple ways that we've implemented Shiny apps within the Johnson & Johnson supply chain, and how they've facilitated us in our ways of working. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the administration of production codes as well as inventory management. But first, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Johnson & Johnson for those who aren't familiar with the company. Johnson & Johnson consists of three business segments, namely pharma, medical devices, and consumer, where Alberto and I work within the consumer segment. 265 operating companies, a truly global company. We spread across 60 unique independent countries with approximately 140,000 employees, estimated providing servicing the needs of 1.2 billion customers. At Johnson & Johnson, we're very passionate about our credo, which talks about how we cater to the needs of our customers, employees, communities, and shareholders. What is this supply chain? Well, in one slide, a supply chain is essentially the process of sourcing raw materials, transforming them into a finished good, and then delivering that said good to your customer. Plan is a specific part of the supply chain that is responsible for end-to-end optimization. So if something is changed at one part of the supply chain, you need to see what the effects will be further downstream or upstream. And our motto in Plan, if you want to call it that, is the right product at the right time in the right place at the right quantity. And that's sort of what you're always trying to balance out there in terms of cost and service. J&J has set the target or goal to become a digital-first company. Now, you can imagine that for certain functions within the company, that can be a little bit more challenging than other parts, especially if you're dealing with a part of the company that's very production line focused on physical things and the manufacturing process. But talking about the production line is a nice way for me to transition into our first use case, which is managing of production codes. The consumer business has quite unique challenges compared to the other segments within the company. You need to see a production code as being a unique recipe on how to manufacture a particular product. But instead of just what ingredients to mix and the order in which you mix them, it also includes certain quality control processes. It includes the labeling, the packaging, and a lot of other parts that go into that. And every time anything is changed on that product, no matter how small it is, it can be a single character that has to be changed or a full stop entered, it would need to get a new production code. Now, this makes perfect sense if you're on the production floor, because obviously it ensures that you make the correct product that's being ordered. But in consumer, we have thousands of products spread out globally, thousands upon thousands. And every year, we're updating or changing about 25% of those products. As I said, If you're in the plant, no problem at all. If anything, it facilitates you to know exactly what that unique key is going to be. But if you're somewhere else in the supply chain, say more on the demand side, facing the customer, and you need to create a demand forecast for that product for the rest of the year, when you look at your sales history or the orders, it will be allocated towards these production codes that keep changing. In fact, you would find that at least 40% of our products, if you look at a production code perspective, have less than 2 years of history. And this can create quite a complex environment when it comes to forecasting. The demand planners responsible for this are constantly having to update the numbers, make sure they've got all the codes in there, specifically if there are promotions at certain times. And from their perspective, where they're focusing on the customer, there's a lot of the times visually absolutely zero change to the product. It might have been changed, the product code might have been changed because we decided to manufacture it in a different location. And this is where the master code comes in. And what we've done is we've taken the demand planners off of their locally kept Excel documents. Yes, they use a lot of Excel. And we've moved them into a Shiny web portal. On the screen on the right-hand side, you can see what they can do is they can filter for their portfolio. So every planner focuses on a certain group of products. And you've got the new successor code and the suggested predecessor code. We also provide a confidence interval, or not a confidence interval, a confidence index, if you would, on do we really think that these two products are the same? And that for that, we just use some basic, text distance calculations, weighting certain items, certain unique characteristics within the description of the product more than others. And it brings up the master data for those two codes. Unfortunately, a GIF file would have to wait for it to cycle through again. But what it does on the right-hand side, there you go. You can see that this code, these two codes are the exact same in almost every material master, where this one has a few differences. And then it would be up to the demand planner to confirm that these are the same codes or state that they're not the same code. And what we do is we update the database then, and we keep a tracking record of which codes are the same and which ones aren't in a central repository. That means all of this information becomes available to the rest of the supply chain and even other parts of the business like commercial that now get better oversight of which codes are connected. With those linkages or mappings, we can create a network of all the different products where each unique network or grouping gets assigned its own master code. And that master code now no longer requires the demand planner to match the volumes or sales. Instead, that's all done in the background, and all they need to do is let us know which codes are linked. And as you can see, some networks can be rather simple, other ones can be far more complex. What we've noticed is this is allowing us to have a much better life cycle management of our products within the supply chain, as well as with any sort of movement of employees with the company. Now someone can look at the complete historical context of a product and not just the historical context from where they joined or what information was handed over from their predecessor. So it's really giving us a much better understanding of our portfolios within the business. With that, I'm going to hand over to you, Alberto.
Thanks, Damon. We're now going to focus a bit what we've been doing for inventory for our company. We've been using Shiny and R in our company already for 2 years to try to deal with our inventory problems. But let's start with the beginning. So Damon, if you can move the slide. Thank you. This is our inventory strategy. And if you see it, we have 3 main pillars. We call it entitlement, control tower, and reporting. Today, I'm going to be presenting what we've done in the first 2 pillars, in the entitlement and the control tower. When we talk about inventory entitlement, what we're looking to see is how much inventory should we be carrying? What is the optimal inventory that we need? And for this, we're using right now R and R Shiny to calculate the targets and calculate our requirements in inventory. The second one is inventory control tower. If you ever been a planner or if you have ever had to work with inventory, it's a very complicated subject, and we tend to be very reactive. React, when we have a lot of inventory, what we're trying to do with inventory control tower, it's mainly have a proactive approach. Can we highlight exceptions? Can we tell to the planners, look into this? And can we help them focus between all the information that we have in the system? How can we, where should we focusing and where should we looking at? The last one is reporting. I'm not going to go through this too much. We just started in the units of reporting, and it's more about the standardization and what globally and having global reports. So let's move on to the first pillar. So if we go into the first pillar, I think the important thing is to understand the environment where we started. If you would have gone to the company 2 years ago, everybody will have a different Excel file. We'll have to do plenty of downloads for plenty of different tools to be able to create our entitlement. Data was very spread, and it took us in the different regions from 3 to 6 months to be able to produce a target, to be able to produce an inventory entitlement. With the help of Shiny, the first thing that we did is we were able to automatize all these reports with R, and we managed to reduce the lead time from 3 to 6 months to basically 1 week. Also, it has helped us streamline the reports. And as you can see, we have a lot more agile now. Before it took us 3 months, so we're basically doing it 1 or twice a year. Since implementation of R and our Shiny, we're able to review our entitlement every quarter. The last improvement that we saw is since we're doing Excel, everybody, any errors that they had in the system, they could just go into Excel and manually change it, and we create more discipline on the planners. And now they have to go into the system. The tool gives them a specific parameters that they can change, but any major change, they have to go into a system, creating some discipline that we did not have before. If we move on, this is everything that we had gained from the backend, but if we move on to the front end, Damon, and we see a bit how the tool looks like, we had a lot of focus on how visually it looks and how can we work with it. You can see there's plenty of data there where the planners will need to focus which items should I look at, what is the priority. So we created this shiny dashboard where the blue means a decrease, the red means an increase, and the size of the balls means how big it is. So the planner can come in and basically focus on specific codes, filter them and go down. And instead of having the list that they have before, they would only review the ones that are important, that are getting a significant change from when we were before. This also streamlined the time that the planners use to review the tool. And the basic word that you hear me repeat a lot through today is priorities. How can we help them prioritize? Where should they focus so they spend their time in the right thing? And they were able to do this with the capabilities that we built from them. Also, the amount of data that we had, we created Excel files that took a long time to refresh. So doing a scenario planning was a very cumbersome task. With Shiny, we're able to review parameters, check what happens if you increase your lead time, what happens if you increase your lead time. So built basically quick scenario planning for business cases in a matter of minutes. If we move on, Damon, if you can help me, thanks. The other thing is before you just have a table and you didn't know what was happening behind it, what was driving the change, what is the performance of your actual lanes. So we wanted to give extra understanding to the planners. So we basically created performance graphs where they can come in and see what is driving the increase. You can see this lane is not very variable, but if we go to this next lane, you can see there's plenty of spread on the data, creating variability and increasing our safety stocks. So before we just had a number, now it's a lot easier for the planners to understand where is the number coming from, and if they see some increase in significant variability, they can always go back to our business partners in logistics and see how they can improve the lane, understand with them what is causing the delays on the lane to drive improvements, things that we were not able to do before because it was very focused on what is the safety stock and what is the numbers. With the reduction on times and with the extra data that we're presenting them, we're driving a lot more improvements that we have before. And that would be a bit what we've done with our first pillar. So if we move on to our second pillar, Damon, the inventory control tower, you'll hear also a lot of focus on priorities. What we've done here is basically we work with the changes. What we try to do is create alert for our planners so they can focus instead of looking all around. What is the alert? And we're giving them alerts with information for them to react. Prioritization, how can they collaborate? Once again, you see the comparison of the actuals against the parameters. What is this in our system? And what is that we're actually doing? And the amount of data that R can manage in combination with the visualization from Shiny, we're able to give very clear understanding to a planner of what's going on for them to focus. And the last thing that has been a major change is before we had a very wide spread of information. So if you wanted to review something, you basically have 5 windows opens with 3 different systems to understand what was happening to one code. So we have our planners spending time going into Excel, creating VLOOKUPs to try to understand what was going on. So when we created the inventory control tower, the idea is instead of the planner going to information, how can we make the information come to a planner? So when they have the alert, they can just say, this is the decision that I need to make, and all the information that I need to make that decision is there. And that was a bit of the design principles that we used to create this app. So Damon, if we move into the app, this is the app. As you can see, we have the alert panel that I mentioned before that is giving the planners the priority or where they should focus. Shiny gave us the possibility to create something that we call flex pages. And what the flex pages does, as you can see here, every time you pick in a different alert, the page changes and gives different information to a planner. So we're able to customize to a planner the information that they get depending on the alert that we have created. And this goes line in line with what I mentioned before, that we want to give to a planner the information that they need to react to a specific alert. Like I said before, we have the priorities that are showing there for them to focus on the most important ones. And if you see now the left corner, you can see we have plenty of KPIs that are very important for supply chain. How good are we forecasting? What is the current UFR, the fill rate of the product, 80%, 20%, for the planner also to be able to see this specific item, how it's performing right now in our key performance indicators. And this has helped the planners basically focus and react and has free a lot of time for them to focus on the items that matter the most for us. That's a bit our journey. We're still going through it. As you saw, at third pillar, we're moving into more of reporting, standardization, and showing the right information more towards management. But we are very happy and we're being very successful the year that we've been going through. I don't know if you want to add anything, Damon.
I just wanted to add something on the alerts there. Traditionally, a lot of the alerts in supply chain have been rather simple. It would be if something happens 50% of the time, create an alert and the planner must jump to it. As I said, we've got over 10,000 codes easily, and you'd always get hundreds of alerts. So what we've also sort of changed it is now the alerts that are manufactured or coming out of Shiny can be a little bit smarter. So if something happened once out of twice, that's not necessarily as important as something that's happened 20 out of 40 times or 50 out of 100. So we're able to make these, without a better word, these smarter alerts than the traditional ones that have been implemented.
All right, that's a bit our journey. So I don't know if you have any questions regarding what we just presented.
Hi, yes. So we do have a few questions. One of the first is, what are the biggest benefits of using R Shiny that you see? Very broad question.
I think if you look at the Mastercode portal, for example, it seems kind of simple, and fair enough it is, but that enabled us to deliver it and get it into the hands of the business owners. In less than 30 days. This is not a traditional sort of like 6-month project, where it takes 3 months to design. You would normally spend, I don't know, let's be optimistic and say 50% of the project time just collecting the data and making sure it all makes sense. The other 40% would be designing the product, the requirements, making sure it all matches. And then sort of the last 10% being change management and handover training. We've now actually completely turned that around, where I think development is taking about 10% of the time. You get the business users in the weekly reviews or the sprint reviews. And we can make those changes a lot faster. And now it's actually training and change management, which is taking a lot longer to produce the materials and explain to them what's been delivered so quickly. So that's one of the things we noticed. Alberto, I don't know if you'd like to add something.
Well, I may sound like a broken record now, but what we've seen is for us, we have a lot of issues with data and data spread. We have 5 different regions, and they are very regional. So we're always having issues to homologate the data to have the same reports. And I think the power that R has brought us data-wise to be able to standardize this data and bring it together. And the simplicity of Shiny on the visualization. It looks pretty simple, but you will be surprised when you compare it to other tools that are on the market right now. Visually, they are not as strong as Shiny, and they don't give you this way of just looking at one dashboard and making the decision right now. It's not as common as it would seem it would be.
So leading off of that, there's another question here that asks, was it difficult to convince people to switch from Excel to our Shiny-based tools?
Yes. I think it's more about change management than actually about the useness of the tool. We are very driven to do our own thing, and we're also very driven to go our own ways. So it's been a bit of a journey. The first thing when you do an app, you present it to the planners, the first thing they ask you is, where is the download button? Because they want to go on and go on through their own ways and do the things that the way they know. No, it's been in a journey as we go and maturing more and more apps, and we get more and more the gain from the planners, and they start using the apps more and more. We start disappearing the Excel button, we start disappearing the downloads and telling them, no, this is the way that we're going to move forward on. So it is a journey. You cannot just start moving on and disappear the Excel button because basically you would create a revolution. But as the company starts getting more used to the apps and start using them more and more, you can see how they feel more comfortable and they start moving away from Excel.
I think there are, just to add to that, there are 2 big things that we do is we always try to have a business champion in there, someone that really is helping promote the product. And so we collect their feedback. And the second one is, don't underestimate how complicated it is for the users to get their information into Excel. They're downloading a lot. Even if they can do a VLOOKUP in 5 seconds, they'll end up doing like 15 of them to combine the data they need, and they need to refresh that once a week. When you offer them that capability automatically in the background, like when we showed the master data coming there, unfortunately, not all that master data is located in the same table source. So what we do is we automatically bring it together, and then there's a little bit of a benefit to bring them on board.
And another question. So someone in the chat was interested in hearing about the journey from the wealth of Excel files into a single source of info. So can you give us a little insight into the journey there?
Well, like I said, there's 2 major improvements. One is time. A lot of these files have a lot of data. So when you refresh them, a lot of them crash. or they've stopped working, or it takes 5 minutes for them to refresh, and that's something that we don't see with R. No, we hit R, and then in 10 seconds we redo the calculations very quickly. So that is helping. And the other thing is the spread of the data. We were having Excel files that were connecting with 100 different VLOOKUPs. Maybe I'm being exaggerating with 100, but probably we have 20 different databases connecting with a VLOOKUP. And then for these 20 different databases, you have to do 20 different downloads. So they've seen the benefit from time of, instead of spending their time building the report, to actually spending the time in doing something about the problem.
And have you faced any scalability issues, if there is one at all?
So,
well, from my perspective, sorry, go ahead if you want. Well, the scalability that we have is the regions work very different. And they have different systems. What we did is we did a bit of an agile approach, and we have a basic standardized setting that we implement for everybody. But once we move into a specific region, we realize what are the difference and build on top of it for this small difference that we have between one another. So I think that's mainly a scalability issue, that we have the difference on how things work and the different system between the regions. But having this standard has helped us just build on top of it and customize it for very specific thing that regions needs.
From a system resources point of view, actually, this has been one of the biggest concerns from our senior management is, can the application handle the number of users we're looking at? And obviously you'll get a list of, okay, well, how many users do we need? And there'll be like, I don't know, 500 to 1,000. And then everyone it comes as a bit of a surprise. And it has been a bit, as I said, it's been a bit of a worry that we've had, but we actually haven't experienced any. We've done some performance testing and that, but the fact that, I don't know, we've got multiple time zones, probably starting from Australia all the way over to, West Coast US, you don't find all of those users on the apps at the same time as well. And there tends to be a process within the supply chain where people will look at things on the first Monday of the month, or the second Friday of the month or something like that. And so, yes, it seems to be a bit spread out. So we've actually had touch wood, no problems with that at the moment. Yeah.
Well, great. And then one last question for you. How many people were involved on developing the app?
So each app being a bit different, but we tend to prefer very small squads. We'll maybe have 2 or 3 developers. So I don't want to call it a project lead, but small teams, very small teams. Less than, I would say, always less than 6 or 7 people, maybe 4 or 5, Alberto?
Yes, it has not been more than 5. They're small teams, as you said. And I think another key is that we tend to keep the business close to us, to really get their needs. So from an agile, we go to them, we develop something, and then get the feedback quickly to make any quick changes. I don't know if that's the same feeling that you have from the master code, Damon.
Very similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sorry, I see one last question here coming in, and they're asking about how the security of running the app in the company. Are there any concerns with security?
So it's on our roadmap to fix that. Okay. We tend to have different apps with different accessibility for different parts of the company, but it's not so much security that we have a concern with as much as who changed it or edited it. So they can contact that person to review their understandings. And that's just more making it visible who's working on it at the moment that we're looking at. But otherwise, no troubles.
Okay, so I think that's all from the questions that we have. So if there's, what's the best way for the folks watching to reach out to contact you if they have any questions?
I think we've got the LinkedIn connections on the conference page. So yeah, and we will respond back as quickly as possible. Maybe share some of the, if you have any more technical questions, we would be happy to help you with, explain how we resolve them.
Great. And we'll post that link possibly in the chat. Alberto, Damon, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.